When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my parents. They never came. Instead, my sister tagged me in a photo. Family day without the drama. I said nothing. Days later, still weak and hooked to machines, I saw 74 missed calls and a text from Dad. We need you. Answer immediately, without thinking twice. I need to start this story with some context about my family, because what happened at the hospital only makes sense if you understand the dynamics I grew up with. I'm Sarah, 27, and I've been the family scapegoat for as long as I can remember. My older sister Emma, 30, has always been the golden child. Everything she did was celebrated, while my achievements were either ignored or somehow turned into something about her. Growing up, if Emma got a B+ on a test, it was cause for celebration and a special dinner out. When I got straight A's, my parents would say something like, "Well, that's what we expect from you," and then immediately pivot to asking Emma about her day. Emma played violin badly for 3 years and quit, but my parents still talk about her musical phase, like she was some child prodigy. I played piano for 8 years, performed in recitals, even won a few competitions, and they attended maybe half my performances. When they did show up, they'd spend the drive home talking about how Emma's friend's recital was so much more advanced, or how Emma could probably play just as well if she put her mind to it. The pattern was consistent and crushing. When I made varsity soccer as a sophomore, my parents missed most of my games because Emma needed rides to her various activities. When Emma barely made JV tennis as a junior, they never missed a match and threw her a party when her team made it to regionals, even though she was benched for most of the tournament. I scored in the 99th percentile on my SATs, and my dad's response was, "Good, now maybe you can help Emma study for hers." Emma scored in the 75th percentile, and they celebrated like she'd gotten a perfect score. The pattern continued into adulthood. Emma dropped out of college twice, and each time my parents were supportive, saying she needed to find herself, and that traditional education isn't for everyone. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science, they attended the ceremony but spent the entire lunch afterward talking about Emma's new boyfriend and how he might be the one. They asked me exactly 0 questions about my job prospects, my thesis, or my plans for the future. Emma bounced from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than a year, but it was always because she was too creative or too intelligent for wherever she was working. My parents would nod sympathetically and offer to help her find something better suited to her unique talents. I've been steadily employed since graduation, working my way up to senior software engineer at a tech company, earning significantly more than most people my age. But my career was just something that existed in the background of their lives, like furniture they'd stopped noticing. What really sealed my understanding of where I stood was when Emma got married 2 years ago. Not only was I not asked to be in the wedding party, but I found out I wasn't even invited until 3 weeks before the ceremony, when my aunt casually mentioned how excited she was to see me there. When I called my mom to ask about the invitation, she acted like it was an innocent oversight. "Oh, did we forget to tell you?" Emma wanted to keep it small and intimate, she said, though I later learned the wedding had 150 guests. I went anyway because I'm family, and spent the entire reception watching my parents dote on Emma while completely ignoring me. I sat at a table with distant relatives who kept asking me questions like, "So how does it feel to watch your sister get married?" And, "When do you think it'll be your turn?" Meanwhile, my parents were flitting around the reception like proud peacocks, introducing Emma and Marcus to everyone and talking about how perfect they were together. The final straw was during the father-daughter dance, when my dad took the microphone and gave this tearful speech about how Emma was his pride and joy, and how she'd brought nothing but happiness to their lives. He talked about her creativity, her free spirit, her ability to light up any room she entered. He never once mentioned that he had another daughter. I left before the cake was cut. After that, I started creating some distance. I'd still show up for major holidays, but I stopped calling as often and stopped making an effort to be part of their daily lives. They didn't seem to notice. Emma was always happy to fill any conversational space with stories about her life, her husband Marcus, their plans for the future. My parents ate it up like she was performing Shakespeare, instead of just talking about her latest craft project or Marcus's get-rich-quick scheme. The distance became more pronounced when Emma and Marcus started having financial problems about 8 months ago. Marcus had quit his perfectly good job in marketing to start some kind of consulting business that, as far as I could tell, consisted mainly of him creating LinkedIn posts about disrupting traditional paradigms and leveraging synergistic solutions. Emma refused to get a job, saying she was supporting Marcus's entrepreneurial journey and that her role as chief happiness officer of their household was a full-time position. Suddenly, every family dinner became a subtle fundraising event. They'd mention their struggles paying rent, or how they couldn't afford to go on the vacation they'd planned, or how Marcus's business just needed a little more capital to really take off. The stories were always vague but urgent. They were about to land a huge client, but they needed money to upgrade their equipment first. They had a breakthrough opportunity, but it required an investment they couldn't quite manage on their own. My parents started helping immediately. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. They paid for Emma and Marcus's anniversary dinner at an expensive restaurant because they deserved to celebrate their love. They covered their car payment when Marcus's business had a temporary cash flow issue. They even gave them money for a weekend getaway to Napa because Emma was so stressed about their financial situation and needed to recharge her creative batteries. I watched all of this happening with a mixture of disgust and fascination. My parents, who had always preached to me about responsibility and living within your means, were enabling Emma's refusal to work and Marcus's delusional business ventures. When I was in college, I had to take out loans and work part-time jobs to make ends meet. When Emma was in college, my parents paid for everything, including her spring break trips to Cabo. Meanwhile, I'd been quietly paying off my student loans ahead of schedule, building an emergency fund, and saving for a down payment on a house. I never asked my parents for money, never expected them to cover my expenses. I was the responsible one, the independent one. And because I didn't need anything from them, I might as well have been invisible. All of this context is important because it explains why what happened at the hospital was so devastating and why my parents' subsequent behavior was so infuriating. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything went wrong. I'd been feeling off for a few days, just run down and tired, but I chalked it up to work stress and the change in seasons. We were in the middle of a big product launch at work, and I'd been putting in 12-hour days trying to debug some particularly stubborn code. I figured I just needed to get through the launch, and then I could catch up on sleep. That morning, I was sitting at my desk reviewing some test results when I started feeling dizzy. At first, I thought I just needed some water or maybe something to eat. I hadn't been great about taking care of myself during the crunch time, but the dizziness got worse, and I started feeling like I couldn't catch my breath. My chest felt tight, and my heart was racing. I remember thinking I just needed some fresh air, and I started to get up from my desk. That's the last thing I remember clearly. My coworker Jake later told me that I collapsed right there in the office. 1 minute I was standing up, the next minute I was on the floor, unconscious. He said my lips had turned blue and I was barely breathing. They called 911 immediately. I woke up in the hospital about 4 hours later, hooked up to machines and feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. There were wires attached to my chest, an IV in my arm, and some kind of oxygen mask over my face. The steady beeping of monitors filled the room, and everything felt hazy and disconnected. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s named Dr. Chen, explained that I'd had what appeared to be a severe allergic reaction, possibly to something I'd eaten, that had caused anaphylactic shock. My blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, and my airway had started to swell shut. If my co-workers hadn't acted so quickly, and if the paramedics hadn't gotten to me when they did, things could have been much worse. "You're lucky," she said, adjusting one of my monitors. "Anaphylaxis can be fatal if not treated immediately. We've stabilized you now, but we want to keep you for observation for a few days to make sure there are no complications." The doctor also mentioned that they'd called my emergency contacts, my parents, to let them know I was in the hospital. "They should be here soon," she said with a reassuring smile. But they didn't come. The first few hours, I kept expecting to see them walk through the door. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, I'd look up hopefully. Every time a nurse came in to check on me, I'd ask if anyone had been by to visit. But as Tuesday turned into Wednesday, and Wednesday dragged on without any sign of my family, I started to understand that they weren't coming. Jake stopped by after work Tuesday evening to check on me, bringing flowers and a get well card signed by half the office. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the chair beside my bed. "Better," I said, though I still felt weak and shaky. "The doctors say I should be able to go home in a couple of days." "That's great news. Have your parents been by yet?" he asked, looking around the empty room. "Not yet," I said, trying to sound casual. "They probably got stuck in traffic or something." But I knew better. My parents lived 20 minutes from the hospital. Even if they'd been at work when they got the call, they could have made it by now. Hell, they could have made it several times over. Wednesday came and went. Still no sign of my parents or Emma. Jake visited again, this time bringing me some books and my laptop from work so I wouldn't be bored. "Boss says not to worry about anything," he said. "Just focus on getting better. Everything's covered." My boss had sent flowers. The HR representative I barely knew had stopped by to check on me and make sure I understood my medical leave options. Even the security guard from my building had somehow heard I was sick and sent a card. But my family was nowhere to be found. Wednesday evening, I finally broke down and called my mom. Maybe there had been some miscommunication. Maybe they'd gone to the wrong hospital. Maybe there was some explanation that would make sense of why I was lying here alone while hooked up to machines that were keeping me alive. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and I could hear voices and laughter in the background. "Oh, hi, Sarah," she said, and she sounded distracted. "How are you feeling?" "I'm in the hospital, Mom. I've been here since yesterday." "Right, yes. The doctors called. Something about an allergy? Anaphylactic shock. I almost died. Well, thank goodness you're okay now. Listen, sweetie, we're actually in the middle of dinner. Emma and Marcus came over, and we're trying out that new recipe Emma found. Can I call you back later?" I hung up without saying goodbye. Thursday evening, while I was scrolling through my phone feeling sorry for myself and trying to distract myself from the loneliness, I saw it. Emma had posted a series of photos on Instagram with the caption, "Family Day without the drama." Sometimes you need to focus on the people who really matter. Blessed family time. Positive vibe only. The photos showed Emma, Marcus, and my parents at some vineyard about 2 hours out of town. They were all smiling, raising wine glasses in a toast, looking like they were having the time of their lives. There were pictures of them walking through the vineyards, sitting at a fancy outdoor lunch table, posing in front of a fountain. The timestamp showed the photos were taken Wednesday afternoon, while I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering why no one had come to see me. But what really twisted the knife was that Emma had tagged me in the post. She'd made sure I'd see it. The "without the drama" comment felt like a deliberate slap in the face. Apparently, their daughter and sister being hospitalized was just drama to be avoided. I stared at my phone screen for what felt like hours. The casual cruelty of it all hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they chosen not to visit me in the hospital, but they'd gone on a family outing instead. They'd planned it, packed a car, driven 2 hours to wine country, and spent the entire day together while I was alone and scared and wondering if I was going to be okay. I scrolled through the comments on the post. Lots of heart eye emojis and comments about how perfect their family was. Several people asking where I was, and Emma responding with vague comments about how I was doing my own thing, and how sometimes you just need quality time with the people who show up. I didn't comment on the post. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just turned my phone face down and tried to focus on getting better. But I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. The way they all looked so happy and relaxed. The way my parents were smiling at Emma and Marcus, like they were the only people in the world who mattered. The doctors kept me for observation until Friday afternoon. In 4 days, I'd received visits from coworkers, flowers from my boss, cards from people at my gym, even a fruit basket from my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who somehow heard I was sick. But not one member of my biological family had made an appearance. When Dr. Chen came to discharge me, she seemed puzzled by the lack of visitors. "Is there someone who can drive you home?" she asked. "You're still feeling weak, and the medications can make you drowsy." "I'll take an Uber," I said. "What about family?" "Usually people have someone." "My family's busy," I said, and she looked at me with such obvious pity that I had to look away. The ride home was quiet, and I spent it staring out the window, trying to process what had happened. My apartment felt strange when I walked in, like I'd been gone for weeks instead of days. I was still weak and shaky, and the doctors had prescribed several medications and told me to take it easy for at least another week. I'd planned to work from home while I recovered, but even sitting at my computer felt exhausting. Over the weekend, I found myself obsessively checking Emma's social media. She'd posted more photos from their wine country trip, including a group selfie at dinner, with the caption, "Nothing beats quality time with your favorite people." There were photos of them at some expensive restaurant, laughing over cocktails. Photos of my parents and Marcus playing some kind of lawn game, while Emma cheered them on. It was like I didn't exist, like I'd never existed. They'd erased me so completely from their family narrative that they could go on a family day without even acknowledging that they were missing someone. I spent the weekend alone in my apartment, taking my medications and trying to wrap my head around what my family had done to me. Every time I started to feel sorry for myself, I'd remember those photos. The pure joy on their faces, the complete absence of any concern for me. It was Sunday evening when my phone started going crazy. The first call came at 6:47 p.m. "Dad." I let it go to voicemail. Then another call at 6:49. Then another at 6:52. By 7:30, I had 15 missed calls from my father, 8 from my mother, and 5 from Emma. I'd also received a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Dad, Sarah, call me back immediately. Mom, we need to talk to you right away. This is urgent. Emma, pick up your phone. This is serious. Dad, this is about the house. Call me back now. Dad, we need you. Answer immediately. The house. Of course it was about the house. Let me explain about the house. My grandmother, my dad's mother, had left her property to both my father and his brother when she died 5 years ago. It was a beautiful old Victorian on 3 acres in an upscale part of town, worth probably close to $800,000. The house had been in our family for generations, and my grandmother had hoped it would stay that way. The problem was that my father and his brother Jim had completely different ideas about what to do with it. Uncle Jim, who lived across the country and had his own successful business, wanted to sell it and split the proceeds. He had no emotional attachment to the house and saw it as a financial asset that was just sitting there depreciating. My father, on the other hand, wanted to keep it in the family. He'd grown up in that house, and so had I and Emma. It was where we'd spent countless holidays and summer afternoons. My grandmother had taught me to bake in that kitchen, and I'd read hundreds of books in the window seat in what used to be my dad's childhood bedroom. The compromise they'd reached was that my father could buy out his brother's half if he could come up with $400,000 within 5 years. The deadline was this month, March 31st to be exact. It was now March 28th. For the past year, my parents had been scrambling to get the money together. They'd refinanced their own home, which had freed up some equity, but not nearly enough. They'd taken out personal loans, maxed out credit cards, even asked Emma and Marcus to help, which was laughable given their financial situation. They'd applied for several business loans, but my father's credit had taken a hit from all the refinancing, and my mother's income as a part-time bookkeeper wasn't enough to qualify for the amount they needed. But they were still short, and time was running out. Uncle Jim had made it clear that he wouldn't extend the deadline again. He'd already given them one extension last year, and his patience was exhausted. If they couldn't come up with the money by March 31st, the house would go on the market. I'd known about their financial struggle, but they'd never directly asked me for help. I think they assumed I didn't have that kind of money. I was just the responsible but unremarkable daughter who worked in tech. They had no idea I'd been saving aggressively for years, living well below my means and investing every spare dollar. They didn't know about the stock options that had vested when my company went public, or the cryptocurrency investments I'd made early that had paid off handsomely. The truth was, I had the money. I could have helped them save my grandmother's house without even denting my financial security. But after years of being treated like an afterthought, after being ignored during one of the scariest experiences of my life, I felt no obligation to rescue them from their financial problems. At 8:15 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Emma, and something made me answer. Sarah! Finally! Where the hell have you been? Emma's voice was high and panicked. I've been home, I said calmly, recovering from being in the hospital. There was a brief pause. Right. Mom mentioned something about that. Look, that's not important right now. We have a family emergency. Not important? I felt a surge of anger. I was unconscious, Emma. I could have died. But you didn't. So can we please focus on what's actually happening? Dad's about to lose Grandma's house. Uncle Jim is being a complete ass about the money. And if Dad can't come up with $400,000 by Thursday, we lose everything. I sat there in stunned silence. My sister had just dismissed my hospitalization as unimportant and was now asking for help with the exact crisis my parents had never bothered to include me in. Why are you calling me about this? I asked. Because we need you to co-sign on a loan. Dad's credit isn't great after all the refinancing, and Mom's income isn't enough on its own. But if you co-sign, they can get the money they need. Co-sign for $400,000? It's not like you'd actually have to pay it. Dad and Mom will handle all the payments. You'd just be helping them qualify. Your credit is good, right? And you have a stable job? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. They wanted me to put my entire financial future at risk for people who couldn't even be bothered to visit me in the hospital. Emma, I said slowly, let me ask you something. When did you find out I was in the hospital? What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question. I don't know. Tuesday, I think? Mom got a call. And where were you on Wednesday? Another pause. We went wine tasting. Why? While I was still in the hospital, hooked up to machines, not knowing if I was going to be okay. Sarah, I don't see why you're making this about... You tagged me in those photos, Emma. You made sure I'd see them. Family day without the drama. Was I the drama you were avoiding? Look, we didn't think it was that serious. Mom said you were fine. I was unconscious for hours. I had anaphylactic shock. I could have stopped breathing and died. But you're fine now, right? Can we please just focus on the house situation? This is Grandma's house we're talking about. The house where we spent Christmas mornings, where Grandma taught us to make cookies, where none of you could be bothered to visit me when I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if I was going to survive. That's when it hit me fully. This was exactly how it had always been. My needs, my feelings, my very life was secondary to whatever Emma wanted or whatever crisis the family was facing. I was only valuable when they needed something from me. I'm not co-signing anything, I said. What? Sarah, be reasonable. This is Grandma's house we're talking about. Don't you care about keeping it in the family? The same family that didn't care enough to visit me in the hospital? The same family that went wine tasting while I was hooked up to machines? That family? You're being dramatic. Or it was just an allergic reaction. I could have died, Emma, but you didn't. Look, I get that your feelings are hurt, but this is bigger than that. This is about preserving our family legacy. Our family legacy? What legacy is that? The legacy of treating me like I don't exist until you need something from me? Emma's voice turned sharp. Fine. Be selfish, but don't blame us when you're old and alone because you chose money over your own family. She hung up. 20 minutes later, my father called. Sarah, your sister said you won't help with the loan. That's right. I don't understand. This is your grandmother's house? She loved you. Don't you want to preserve her memory? The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Dad, did you know I was in the hospital this week? Your mother mentioned you had some kind of episode. Some kind of episode? I had anaphylactic shock. I was unconscious. The doctors called you because they thought I might die. Well, obviously you're fine now. That's not the point. The point is that when I needed my family, none of you showed up. But now that you need something from me, suddenly I'm getting 74 phone calls. That's different. This is about losing the house. And what I went through wasn't important enough to interrupt your wine tasting? There was a long silence. Look, Sarah, I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt, but this is bigger than that. This is about our family legacy. Our family legacy? What legacy is that, Dad? The legacy of treating me like I don't exist until you need something from me? You're being unreasonable. This is your grandmother's house, and I'm your daughter. Or I thought I was, until this week when I realized that I apparently don't matter to any of you unless you need something from me. That's not true, isn't it? Let me ask you something. How much money have you given Emma and Marcus in the past year? That's between us and them. I'm guessing it's thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Money you could have saved toward buying out Uncle Jim, but you spent it bailing out Emma instead, and now you expect me to solve the problem you created. Emma needed our help. She and Marcus are going through a difficult time, and I needed my family when I was in the hospital. But you chose a vineyard instead. My father's voice hardened. If you don't help us with this loan, we'll lose the house. Is that what you want? Do you want to be responsible for losing your grandmother's house? What I want is to never have to wonder again whether my own family gives a damn about me. What I want is to not have to find out through Instagram that you're all having family time while I'm lying in a hospital bed. What I want is to matter to you even when you don't need something from me. Sarah. The answer is no, Dad. I'm not co-signing your loan. I'm not bailing you out of the mess you made by prioritizing Emma over everything else, including basic financial planning. Fine, but don't come crawling back to us when you realize what you've done. Don't expect to be welcome at family gatherings when you're the reason we lost your grandmother's house. I haven't been welcome at family gatherings for years. The only difference is now I won't pretend otherwise. He hung up. Over the next few days, the calls and texts continued relentlessly. My mother tried the guilt trip approach, talking about how disappointed my grandmother would be if we lost her house. She sent me long voice messages about family loyalty and how she couldn't understand how I could be so cold. Emma sent me a series of nasty messages, calling me selfish and vindictive. She accused me of holding a grudge over one little hospital visit and said I was using my medical emergency to manipulate the family. She even suggested that I had somehow planned the whole thing to get attention. Even Marcus got involved, sending me a long text about family loyalty and how successful people have an obligation to help their relatives. He lectured me about karma and how the universe would punish me for turning my back on family in their time of need. I ignored all of them. A week later, I found out through my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who I'd always been closer to than my immediate family, that my parents had lost the house. Uncle Jim had refused to extend the deadline again, and they couldn't qualify for the loan without a co-signer. The house would be going on the market within the month. Aunt Linda seemed to think I should feel guilty about it. I know your parents haven't always been perfect, she said during a phone call, But losing your grandmother's house is such a tragedy. Couldn't you have helped them out? I mean, you're doing so well with your job and everything. Aunt Linda, I said, did you know I was in the hospital last week? What? Number. What happened? I told her the whole story about the collapse at work, the anaphylactic shock, the 4 days in the hospital, the Instagram post, the complete absence of my family when I needed them most. By the time I finished, she was quiet. I had no idea, she said finally. Sarah, that's awful. How are you feeling now? Physically, I'm better. Emotionally, I'm processing a lot. I can't believe they didn't visit you. I don't understand how they could do that. And then to ask you for money after treating you like that? But they expected me to co-sign a $400,000 loan. When you put it like that, she paused. You know what? I think you did the right thing. Family goes both ways. They can't just ignore you when it's convenient and then expect you to solve their problems. That conversation with Aunt Linda was healing in a way I hadn't expected. Having someone validate my feelings, someone who understood the situation and agreed that my parents' behavior was wrong, helped me feel less crazy and less guilty. It's been 6 months now since the hospital incident and the loan situation. My parents and Emma have stopped contacting me entirely, though I occasionally hear updates through Aunt Linda. Emma and Marcus did indeed move in with my parents after losing their apartment, when Marcus's business finally failed completely. According to Aunt Linda, the whole household is pretty tense, with 4 adults trying to coexist in a 3-bedroom house while dealing with the disappointment of losing my grandmother's property. Meanwhile, I've been thriving in ways I never expected. I got a promotion at work, largely because I'd been putting in so much effort to distract myself from family drama. My boss had noticed my dedication during the product launch and my professionalism in handling my medical leave. I was now leading my own team and earning more money than I'd ever thought possible. I've been going to therapy to work through some of the deeper issues around how I was treated growing up. My therapist helped me understand that what I experienced wasn't just favoritism, but a form of emotional neglect that had shaped my entire sense of self-worth. I've even started dating someone new, a guy named David who works in finance and finds it incomprehensible that my family could treat me the way they did. Wait, he said when I told him the story. They didn't visit you in the hospital at all? Not once? Nope, but they tagged me in their wine tasting photos while I was still hooked up to monitors. That's not just neglectful, that's cruel. Who does that to someone they supposedly love? That's the thing I've been coming to understand through therapy and through conversations with people like David and Aunt Linda. What my family did wasn't normal. It wasn't acceptable. And I don't have to tolerate it just because we share DNA. Last month, I did something that would have been unthinkable to me a year ago. I bought a house. A beautiful 3-bedroom bungalow with a big backyard and a 2-car garage. It's not as grand as my grandmother's Victorian, but it's mine. I earned it, I saved for it, and I don't owe anyone anything for it. I thought about inviting my family to see it, or at least mentioning it to them. But then I remembered lying in that hospital bed, wondering why no one cared enough to visit me, while they were off having family time without the drama. Instead, I invited the people who actually matter to me. Jake from work, who visited me in the hospital and helped me get home safely. David, who brought champagne and cooked dinner in my new kitchen for my housewarming. Aunt Linda, who flew in from across the country just to see my new place and tell me how proud she was of me. These are the people who show up. These are the people who care about me not just when they need something, but all the time. This is what real family looks like.